Arcane is a masterpiece. It has great writing, amazing characters, a beautiful story, but equally as important, it has a message. There's a lot of content out there where it's iffy to say whether or not it's tied to politics, but I don't think it's a stretch to claim that Arcane falls under that category. In this video, I will bridge the gap between Arcane and politics. On the subject of bridges, first is the geopolitics of Arcane's setting. Separated by a bridge are two population centers, Piltover and the Undercity. Both locations are technically owned by the ruling governments of Piltover via their enforcers who have the overarching authority of both inhabitants. The obvious separation between the poor and the rich is made clear in Piltover's name, a city that is over Pilt, over the poor. The ruling power of Piltover appears to be a representative city-state governed by a council that seems to make both executive, legislative, and even judicial decisions when they determine Jace's punishment for his illegal experiments. Attached to the council are houses, but it is unclear whether these houses are merely symbolic or if they have actual powers beyond status. Nor is it clear if there is a constitution, since council members seem to have the ability to bend rules on a whim and dictate what majority is necessary for certain changes. In short, it is an indirect oligarchy, governance of the few without the population they represent having any say-so. And they appear to be a plutocracy, that is, they represent the interests of the rich elite. This is noticed when Jace discovers that rooting out corruption will make him enemies with the rich, who take advantage of it, in order to engage in exotic commodities and elitist services. This is also so because the council has primarily used the hex tech technology in order to better trade and grow the wealth-benefiting economy. While Piltover's government seems to be one of the few obvious factions, we can't ignore the de facto governance of the Undercity. The Undercity appears to be autonomously organized, like a protectorate or province under Piltover, since Piltover allows people like Vander or Silco to represent the masses there. So much so that the state of the Undercity seems to be reflected by who represents it. In the beginning, the Undercity seemed like a troubled but humble location with a greater unity and fewer thugs, but after Vander's death and under Silco's influence, the Undercity only seemed to get worse with more criminality. The Undercity's relationship with Piltover seems to be parasitical, only sending enforcers when they want something, and otherwise exploiting its people for the resources and income they provide. This is noticed in the fact that miners are mentioned multiple times, like when Jace builds the Atlas Gauntlets to improve miners' productivity. It is probably safe to assume that the Undercity's masses toil other forms of labor for Piltover as well, especially when its council is very resilient against giving Zaun its independence. Though the story revolves around the personal lives of Vi and her friends, a second more subtle story is being conveyed. This story is the agitation, that is, the disapproval against their oppression, of the Undercity's masses having desires to oppose Piltover, not once, but twice. Vander and Silco both reveal confirmations that there was a previous rebellion, and we get to see the costly outcome of that rebellion with the death of Vi and Powder's parents. To me, Vander and Silco represent two opposing politics that exist in our own world. Vander, who is a protective parent that collaborates with the enforcers, seems to symbolize defeatism and pacifism. He makes many attempts to calm people down when they seek justice, and scolds Vi for wanting the same. His whole relationship with Grayson is a pragmatic one that allows him to benefit his people and keep the enforcers at bay. This is noticed when Grayson tells Vander that she can only keep them away for so long, and that she wants to work with him by getting a scapegoat for the heist Vi and her friends committed. While I think Vander means well, he is a traitor who sold out his city and dismisses people's valid outcries in order to maintain personal stability. This prevents short-term violence, but continues long-term exploitation and oppression. Meanwhile, Silco symbolizes opportunism and revolution. He and Vander once tried to overthrow Piltover before, and now he wants to make the Undercity an independent nation, the nation of Zaun. The Undercity having its own self-determination would be a great thing, in my opinion. I believe this because Piltover and its council appear to be way too disconnected and alienated from the ongoings within the Undercity. Multiple examples confirm this. When Caitlyn had no knowledge of the Shimmer addicts within the Undercity's darker parts, when Caitlyn tries to dismiss her city's blame that Echo accuses Piltover officials of, when Vi calls out Jace for being unaware of what it's like to be in Stillwater's prison cells, when Jace breaks down over killing a child, when Jace gets scolded by Victor for desiring violence against the Undercity's residents, who he deems as savages, and when Vi chews out the council for being unaware of who Silco truly is. Better yet, as revealed from Runeterra lore, the River Pilt drowned half of where the Undercity is now, as Piltover's officials blew up part of a passageway, wanting to have better trade routes for their ships prior to the Hex Gates. The original canal's construction caused a collapse, which released toxic gas, poisoning the people of the Undercity, something Silco reminded his collaborators of during a meeting. Powerless, the Undercity's people prayed to Janna, an ancient wind spirit, in order to clear away higher concentrations of toxic gas. The fact that enforcers wear breathing masks must be a metaphor for the saying that they don't even breathe the same air as the Zaunites. And yet, a further example is how even Jace and Victor, who both mean well, are still creating technology that only increases productivity without taking into consideration how the miners would feel. The claim is that the Atlas gauntlets allow miners to work faster and harder without fatigue, but why would workers want to work harder and longer in such strenuous and toxic conditions? Even if the council finally provided better conditions and representation for the Undercity, there is nothing to suggest that the next generation of council members would continue that, nor is there anything to suggest that they'd be able to keep up with the Undercity's ever-changing and demanding material needs. An independent zone doesn't need the unnecessary approvals of people who don't even live there, and since the Zaunites mostly consist of the working class, they're perfectly capable of producing the necessary materials and social structures for themselves in a more efficient and direct way than Piltover could as it stands. This begs the question, if Silco desires independence for the people's benefit, then why does he seem so evil, opportunistic, and corrupt? This is where my own theory comes in. There is a term known as lumpen proletariat. The proletariat is a fancy word for the working class, and lumpen proletariat can refer to the dispossessed section of workers, who are driven by their conditions to commit crimes in order to survive. Perhaps Silco meant well, and wanted to give the people Shimmer, to give them a fighting chance against their oppressors. But drugs have been historically known to dramatically increase dispossession and isolation, leading people to become even more agitated, more desperate, and overall suffer further. And numerous times have members of the Undercity confirmed the worsened conditions under Silco, from Vi, Echo, the brothel headmistress, etc. Clearly, Shimmer is making people worse in addition to the increase in criminality under Silco's negligence, and the increase in corruption with Silco cooperating with other thug groups. But as we can see throughout the show, worsening the people's conditions is really only hurting the Undercity. Even if Silco managed to secure Zaun's independence, he still has a population addicted to the substances he provided, a population used to the crimes he ignored, and a population comforted by the corrupt services of the thugs and black markets. It's a decision Silco makes for the people without their consent, in order to make them less tolerant of Piltover and their oppressors, at the expense of more suffering than previously experienced. So where can the story go from here? What options do the people have besides imperialist Piltover, defeatist Vander, and accelerationist Silco? The Firelights. The Firelights are potentially the best faction in my opinion, as the leader Echo seems to be almost put into his position by the people. The Firelights contest against both the criminals of Zaun and the people of Piltover, as noticed with them attacking Silco's Shimmer supply runs, attacking Jinx multiple times, and going against Piltover's interests, which directly and indirectly support the Undercity's corruption and oppression. The area surrounding their tree seems to exist as some sort of autonomous zone, independent and willing to defend itself against enforcers and goons alike. If any faction is politically coded, the Firelights give me the vibes of anarchists. The Firelights are the only faction to exist based on the wants of the people, as they are a response to the worsened conditions brought on by Silco. All in all, I believe that beyond the story of Arcane are many messages that make up one larger message. It shares the message of independence, but also shows the many approaches to achieving it. It teaches the lessons of dictators and bureaucrats, both terrible and benevolent, of divided classes with their differing interests, of people leading others versus people leading themselves, and on top of that, it showcases alienation, from the highest council member to the lowest Shimmer addict. Arcane is a political masterpiece, with many comparisons to the world we live in, a world that has its own share of nations, declarations of independence, of dictators and bureaucrats, of elites and the poor, and of alienating conditions. Let Arcane be a great story to all of us on what we can do to better our world. This has been the Politics of Arcane. If you liked this video or learned something new, leave a like. If you didn't, then leave a dislike. Subscribe for more content like this.